My name's Shane Bevin. I'm from a company called Monkey Stack, as Emil said. We're a company that's based in Hindley Street, the classy end of town, and we do everything from TV adverts right through to video games. So we're a bit of everything. So one of the things that I guess, one of the reasons why I'm here today is to show you guys that there's more than one way into that industry, and that industry isn't necessarily one thing. There might be a whole lot of ways of sort of getting in. And courses-wise, like university courses and TAFE courses, I'll try and give some sort of idea as to what our background is in the studio. So there's 12 of us in the studio, and that's, I think you would call that a medium to large studio in Adelaide. There's not a huge amount of massive studios. There's places like Rising Sun Pictures. They do special effects for like the Harry Potter films and stuff like that. They might have 300 people in the room at once. So we're fairly small, but we're pretty broad in what we do, as I said. Probably the best way I can introduce what my company does, though, is just to hit play on a show reel. Goes for a few minutes, not too many minutes, and this will give you some sort of idea of the kind of stuff that we do. So you probably recognise some of these ads from TV. That's a show reel of our work, and the reason why we make a show reel is so that when we're talking to our clients, we can show them that and say, what kind of stuff are you looking for? They can look through and say, oh yeah, I really like those cute little bunnies, or I really like that person getting chopped up in the middle there. And really, it gives them a chance to sort of set what they're looking for. For us though, and for you guys today, I guess the main takeaway message from that is that there's a really broad range of styles there, and there's also a really broad range of software used, and this is looking mostly at animation. There's a few little interactive bits in there, but that's mostly our animation reel. So as far as skill sets go within our studio, I don't want to pigeonhole people completely because we all do a bit of everything, but really within the studio there's a full-time producer, there's a full-time technical director, that's me, there's a full-time art director, we've got 2 illustrators, 2 3D artists, and the rest are animation crew. So that's it's a pretty broad range, and excuse me, it might be that some of you are looking for some of those areas, but the really important thing is within the studio we all do a little bit of everything. My main role is as technical director, is making sure all the software is working and all that sort of stuff, but I'm sort of lead 3D modeler as well, so you can kind of cross over jobs. So one of the animation, I mean, who in here is more heading down the art side of things? Okay, a few people. Programming, game design, yep, a few people. Animation, not so many. The main thing is for us, it's not really a job, it's kind of a lifestyle choice. You basically say, okay, well, I've finished my work for the day. I don't go home and like sit in a little mud hut somewhere with no electricity and no screens. I go home to, every console, movies, video games, all of that geeky stuff, and paints, sculpture, all of that that's my life. So if you're looking at getting into this as a job, you kind of end up having to think about it that way. And that doesn't mean that you have to be working, 9 in the morning till 12 at night. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that the work part of things sort of flows into into your life side of things as well. You can go home and tell your parents that while you're playing video games, you're researching. Okay, now that sounds funny, but in a lot of ways, that's what you are doing if you're playing them right. So I'll usually play through a video game, for instance, and go, okay, this is really awesome, I'm really loving it. Just finished The Last of Us, if anyone's played that, it's absolutely awesome game. But I spent quite a bit of time during that game just walking around, looking at textures on walls, getting closer, seeing when they start to pixelate, trying to see where there's glitches in the animation, all of that sort of stuff as well. When I go to watch films, I have to go and watch the film twice, because the first time I just sit and enjoy it, the second time I go back and start picking at the special effects. So it's a bit of a lifestyle choice. Hey, what kind of skills do we want from our employees? Well, when there's 11 people in a room, okay, we've got 2 rooms, but it's kind of not much bigger than this space. Number one, you need to shower daily. That's a good start. You need to have a bit of a sense of humour. The really big thing for us is that there's no way you can have 11 grumpy people in a room working on stuff. So really, someone a bit light. You need to be good at working with a team. Now, you guys are probably at high school. You probably do lots of teamwork projects, and I bet you some of you absolutely love it, and some of you absolutely hate it. The realistic side of it is that once you get out into a job, you're probably going to need to be working in a team constantly. If you're working on your own, you're more likely to just be a freelancer, but even then you're going to be working with a client. So that's still a team. So yeah, I mean that's a big thing. I won't bore you with all of the other stuff, be punctual, all that sort of guff. Be honest, don't steal office supplies. But for us, I mean, the most important thing is that you're actually really into the job. And the job is, as I said, not just at work, but at home as well. For us, the games that we make, there's 2 types. There's one which is a funded game from a client. So for instance, we did some games for SA Water for, for their desal plant. And I'll show you them in a minute. But then there's other games which are our own IP. So have you guys heard the word or the letters IP before? Yep. Yeah. Intellectual property means it's our idea. We want to keep it. We're working on it so that we can hopefully be making money while we're sleeping. Okay, because when you get a game out there, that's hopefully what will happen. People will be buying it, and not just people in Adelaide, people overseas, people on the internet, everywhere. Would hopefully be buying it. And so in that case, you're sort of making money while you're sleeping. If we were making money only the hours that we could work, we'd probably go broke pretty quick. So we've got to try and figure out a way that, it's not just every hour we put in. So looking at the games for clients, if I just really quickly show you the type of stuff. So this was for the education centre at the desal plant. So everyone's aware of the desal plant, right? Yep. Just as we released this, that's when they mothballed it. But it's since come back online, so everyone's happy. But what they wanted was something that they could put in their education centre that would work on iPads, would work on big screen TVs that are touch screens, and could eventually end up on the web as well. And there were 2 things that they needed us to do. Number one, have a game that was about building the desal centre. And number 2, have something that was more of like a water management sort of side of things. So just unplug that. And if I just hit play down the bottom here. Okay, maybe we'll try and give it... The sound's going to sound awesome down the back of the room. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. So this was a game that we knew who the audience was. The audience was going to be sort of upper primary, lower secondary students, but also having to kind of bleed down to lower primary and also bleed up to the older guys like you. So what we've got is a couple of different modes, and for this one, okay, so it starts with a tutorial. What they wanted was to take the parts of the desal plant and give the kids an idea, first of all, what it does, but also where it fits in the whole scheme of things. So now this is going to be really hard to play sideways. so you can all laugh. So we've got the kind of bin bar down the bottom here, and then we can drag stuff out of that and place it on this grid. Okay, and I've lined that up. So that's the start of our decel plant. Now the whole idea is that we're meant to fill in everything. I'm not going to sit here and fill in everything because it's going to be really boring and I'm going to end up with some sort of weird RSI. But basically every plant part needs to fit together perfectly for it to work. And then as you go along you test the plant. So if we go... So obviously it's real life and documentary styling. So what they wanted to do was say, okay, well, that's why it's not working. You can go through, you can actually click on any of these, if I can see where the pointer is. Click on that and it'll bring up what it does. So what they wanted was, you could play it like a puzzle game. You could just kind of drag bits out, put them together and then go test. And if it says, no, this bit's broken, it'll just take that away. But then they also wanted the capacity for those real boffin kids who just sit, there's probably some of you in the audience, who sit there and they read through everything and they just want to get it right the first time. They read through every single one of these and then they just drag them out and they hit play and they nail it first time. So what we're trying to do is make something that would work for both of those groups. We actually did some testing on a year 3 class, and the year 3 class could actually finish the game. They finished it in a completely different way than you guys would finish it. And when we played it with a year 12 class, we could see that. Everyone was much more about, okay, let's try and actually figure this out rather than randomly drop stuff in. But the kids had a good time. So that was the decel plant building side of things. The other one that I'll just really quickly put up, just to show a completely different genre of game, is something that's more like a management game. So they wanted everyone to understand the pain they go through every day to bring you water. And so with this one, okay, so with this one, you've got the city of Adelaide. It's a pretty stylised city, obviously. But the city of Adelaide, we've got the reservoirs, we've got the river, we've got no decel plant yet because it hasn't been built, and we've got the wastewater plant. So what we can do is actually go through and dial in and out the amount of water that we're using in each thing. Now, obviously, if we just crank up everything, we're going to run out of water in the river, we're going to run out of water in the reservoirs, and it's cheaper to do, but we start wrecking the environment. So it's one of those balancing games. The other side of it is just every single one of these little alert things is someone saying, I've had a breakdown, or I need some education on this, a whole bunch of that sort of stuff. And we can just drag a team out to cover that. So that's the 2 games. That's the 2 games. The reason why they came to us was, number one, because of the game design side of things, but number 2, and mostly because they'd seen some of our animation and they'd seen some of our short films and stuff like that. And so what it means for them is that they knew that, you know, it was going to at least look kind of all right and the kids would at least get that out of it. But the first stuff that they sent through to us was, you know, well, here's what happens in the world of water. And they had these Excel spreadsheets, like about 500 of them. And it was like, you know, if we use too much of the Murray River, then these are the breeds of fish that are going to be affected, and then this will happen, and then this guy will do this. And by the time we'd finished reading through them all, we were like, oh my God, you know, that's way too much stuff. So we had to simplify it all down as well. Still have the same message. If you use too much river water, you do affect the environment, but we're not getting down to which fish are dying. So we had to really compress that down. So process for something like that is, number one, that knowing who the audience is, going through and figuring out, well, what kind of game do they want? We knew that they wanted a building game and a management game. And then how do we actually approach that information and really, really squash it down? So that's probably, I reckon, 40% of our time during that project was taken up just in that, just in the game design portion of it. And then production-wise, we have to do all the animations, we have to get the voices recorded, all of that sort of stuff. So for us, that project kept the whole studio busy for around about a sort of 2 to 3 month period, which is a fairly quick turnaround for something like this. And that included all of the asset creation, all of that sort of stuff as well. Included some visits to the D-cell plant, listening to some scientists tell us stuff that we didn't understand, and then trying to, once again, simplify what they were on about. So process-wise, as Michael sort of pointed out before, game design is a really iterative process. So by that I mean you do something and then you add to it. So you iterate, you just keep on doing it again and again and again until it's right. So we could show our client, SA Water, we could show, well, here's what the script is. This is what the people are going to be saying. Here's what the people look like. The guy who's in the tutorial with the glasses and the hard hat, we did the image of him and we sent it through to SA Water, and they sent back the email that obviously everyone thought he was really, really funny, and we were like, it's not that funny, till we had a meeting with them, and then they showed the site manager. It's like we'd actually done an exact copy of the actual guy that runs the plant. So they were like, yeah, tick that off. So by the time we actually get through that, we're now on to actually production. So we could produce all of the animations, and in the background, we're also doing the game design. So Unity's been mentioned a couple of times today. Unity's a game engine, and it's pretty cool. The good thing about Unity is that there's two sort of levels to it. There's the kind of art-based level, and then there's the programming level. And the art-based level allows you to do some pretty easy to drag and drop art side of things. So 3D models come in, you just drag them in there, and there you go, your 3D model's in there. It's not quite that easy, but it's getting there. Animations, you can bring them in as well. You can trigger the animations with interactivity, all of that sort of gear. It's really simple. And the main first, the lowest level engine is completely free. So you can just download it at home and start actually experimenting. It's pretty good. For us as a studio, it also only costs $1,500 for the full working version. Now, if we were wanting to do something like, if we said, oh, well, Far Cry is pretty cool, Crysis game's pretty cool, let's do something in the Crysis engine. It's going to cost around about $1 million for the license to use that engine. So if these guys are paying us this much and the engine's going to cost this much, well, that's not going to work. So we have to work with what we can. Software-wise, you guys all use the Adobe stuff, Photoshop. Who hasn't ever used Photoshop? It's really freaky. Now everyone's used Photoshop. When I was teaching a few years ago, it was like you would say, who's used Photoshop? And a few people have put their hand up. I think everybody in the world now knows what Photoshop is, at least. After Effects for animation, we use a lot. 3D Studio Max we use for our 3D modelling and animation. I know you guys, did you say you've got Maya in here? Yep. Very similar. And we also use Blender. And Blender's a completely free, open source 3D modeler, animation tool, game engine, it's a bit of everything. It's absolutely crazy that it's free, but the learning curve on it's kind of like that. It's not easy to pick up. As far as the actual programming side of it happens, we actually link in with another company to do the hardcore programming. So we can build levels, we can get everything in there, and then they come in and do the really just probably for those games, I reckon probably 40% of the programming side of it. The rest was us just kind of hacking around and dragging and dropping if and then statements. It's kind of nice to work with. Okay, so who's ever used a game engine, game maker? Yeah. What have you used? Unity. Yep.
Unity.
Yep.
Pretty good, and RPG Maker.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yep.
RPG Maker.
Yeah. Cool. Really good way of starting out. Modding other games, using those sorts of engines, particularly if they're an engine that's really like RPG Maker, that's really aimed at doing one thing and doing it really, really well. But there's Game Maker out there, that's pretty good. Construct 2 is pretty good. That allows you to do HTML5 games, which you can just drop on a website. So that's pretty good as well. And all of them pretty reasonable prices nowadays, or they have free versions, or they at least have a trial version. So software-wise, it is possible to kick in. Okay, so there is no one way of getting into the industry. So I actually studied originally. Well, actually, I left school after year 12 and I got a job in retail. Who works in retail? Anyone? You should work in retail for a while and then you'll know that you want to do anything but retail. I worked in computers, I worked in home entertainment, I worked in toys, and I worked in books. And I just wanted to get out of there. So I actually went to uni and studied to be a junior primary school teacher. Fair distance between those two things. At the end of my course, there were no jobs available. They'd said that a whole lot of teachers were going to be retired and a whole lot of teachers didn't retire. So there were no jobs available, and so I went, okay, what am I going to do? I'm really interested in computers and multimedia. I'd been working on my own stuff for quite a while, so I went and did a 1-year multimedia course. It was a certificate 3, I reckon. And at the end of that, I had an exhibition of my work along with the rest of my classmates, and a guy who owned a school came down, had a look, said, do you want to do a week's work experience teaching multimedia? So I went and did a week's work experience teaching multimedia, and at the end of that week they offered me a job full-time teaching. So I studied to be a junior primary school teacher, ended up teaching adults multimedia instead. Did that for about 5 years, and then the school that I was teaching at crashed and burned, not through any fault of the multimedia course, mind you, but it crashed and burned, and so we decided, well, let's start Monkey Stack. So we started Monkey Stack along with another guy that I was teaching with and one of our ex-students, and that was 10 years ago, and we've been around since. So it's not really a steady way into the industry. It kind of went all over the place. Probably the most obvious way into the industry is to finish high school, go to TAFE or uni, doing something in multimedia. If you're doing IT or computer science or computer engineering or something like that, you're going to be heading into more of the programming side of things. But if you want to get into the art side of things, there's game art courses out there. You've already listed some. And there's a heap of online stuff as well. So I wish I was getting into this now. I'm glad I got into it when I did, but I wish I was getting into it now, because you can jump onto Google, type in 3D animation and get 1,000,001 tutorials. A lot of them are really bad, but some of them are really good, as with everything on the internet. So you can teach yourself. However, another question that's asked here is, what certificates and degrees do we have? Right, so within Monkey Stack, we've got, I'm a BE Teach, Troy's a BE Ed, Justin did graphic design. There's a couple of others that did graphic design, a couple that did short courses in animation and just happened to be really, really damn good at it. But on the whole, we like people to have gone through some sort of course. It doesn't mean that that's the main thing. We get lots and lots of people coming to us from uni and from the TAFEs who say, I've finished my course, where's my job? Right? Now, this is not like one of those jobs where you show real. Now what we want is someone in the middle of those two. We want someone with some qualifications and a really great show reel and portfolio. So how do you get a really great show reel and portfolio? You just got to make lots of stuff. Right? The more stuff you make, the better you get, the more practice you have. And eventually you build up a portfolio that's good enough to get you a foot into the industry. This is a really small industry at the moment. You know, even as broad as Monkey Stack is, it's a really small industry. So you're going to be competing with some people who are pretty good. So you're going to make sure that your stuff's really good as well. In the meantime though, I mean the fact that schools like this now have labs like this and the software that you use and all of that sort of stuff is absolutely awesome. You know, when I was studying, obviously there was nothing like this around. Mike, I know you mentioned CDW, the Concept Design Workshop. If you're really into the art side of things and concept art especially, CDW is a really great place to go to. And it's definitely something that you would get a lot of.